In past specials, I've reviewed games by Digital Homicide, a small independent game developer that gained infamy by having very public and ugly feuds with games journalist Jim Sterling. I like Sterling. He dredges up a lot of interesting Steam games, and he's an insightful journalist, his irritating compulsion to publicly troll people who disagree with him notwithstanding. Watching the spat between Sterling and Digital Homicide has almost been like the back and forth between two comic book adversaries, but a line has been crossed, and the joke is no longer funny. Digital Homicide has filed a lawsuit against Jim Sterling for $10 million in damages. They're suing for lost income because they believe it's exclusively Jim's fault their games no longer sell. They're suing for defamation because they believe every word Sterling has ever said about them has been lies to cripple their business. And they're suing for mental anguish because they believe every single person who's ever slacked them off in his Steam comments section has done so under Sterling's command and coercion. You almost have to admire the stones it takes to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to get in front of a judge so that you can claim that chubby man has cultivated a secret order of gamers to drive our two-person game studio out of business. We know this because people were mean to us on the internet. So Digital Homicide thinks every single complaint Sterling's ever lobbied against them was completely made up just to spite them? Well, maybe a second opinion is in order. I've previously reviewed 4 of Digital Homicide's games. Now I'm back for the rest of them. But first, a recap of their previous releases. The Slaughtering Grounds was the most simplistic shooter I've ever seen. It was impossible to win, as completing objectives simply caused the objective to reset, impossible to lose, with infinite lives and failing to complete an objective did nothing. The entire game was just fighting one enemy type, and it was so blatantly unfinished and poorly designed, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single mechanic that worked correctly. Forsaken Uprising was an MMO with no quests or goals, an online game with no players, a crafting and resource collection game where most of the materials were physically impossible to acquire due to rampant glitches, a great big pile of completely unfinished mess. Devil's Share was an inconceivably broken horror game that was so unbalanced there was no way to stay alive, and sheer attrition was the only way to make any progress. And finally, Galactic Hitman was a shooter that was somehow even less finished than the Slaughtering Grounds. 2 enemy models across the entire game, no AI, levels made entirely out of identical narrow hallways, perfectly accurate enemies that didn't move and could not be outmaneuvered. Oh, but if you ducked, they suddenly could not land a single hit on you. And I haven't even covered half of Digital Homicide's sorry excuse for a library. They've got 11 games on their Steam profile, assuming they haven't gotten any others under fake names. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. I should point out before we start that when I mentioned the thought of doing a Digital Homicide special, a viewer named Colby KRD on Steam immediately donated 3 of their games for review, and the first is Tempertantrum. Thanks, Colby. You play as a little boy who runs around demolishing all the stuff in a house while being chased by ghosts that knock him unconscious with one touch. Really, the ghosts are the real heroes here. It's astounding how cheap the game looks. You stand near an object and it spontaneously explodes with no animation, and the ghosts are completely static models that float around but don't actually move. The big, overwhelming, cancerous problem with the game is the controls. If you're standing still, you can move in any direction you want, but if you don't go straight, the camera takes so long to recenter behind you that you're basically blind for 2 or 3 seconds while the camera drunkenly swerves around. Once you start moving, however, the controls become ridiculously stiff and slippery at the same time. Your character turns by running in a giant circle until eventually he's facing the direction you want, so you're constantly overshooting every time you try to turn. I get the feeling you're supposed to move by turning while constantly holding down the forward key, because this is the smoothest that the camera ever moves, but this still doesn't fix the problem of your character moving on a huge freaking arc just to make a slight course correction. You just have no ability to move with any precision, which is exacerbated by the level layouts. Every room has one extremely narrow entrance and exit, and many of the rooms are too narrow to maneuver around the ghosts, so if you're stuck in the same room as one, good freaking luck getting around him. Trying to plan around or outsmart the ghost is a waste of time because the cheating bastards can phase through walls and beeline straight towards you. You pick up pieces of candy, which allow you to kill the ghost only for them to respawn 5 seconds later, but candy is hard to get. It's not hard to find, mind you, it just takes 4 or 5 passes by each piece of candy before I pick it up because the controls blow ass! And once you have the candy, your movement speed increases and the controls get even worse. You can't make a slight turn without slamming into 3 different walls. Capping off all of this is the horrendous camera. You have 0 control over the camera, and it barely manages to follow you around. It takes ages to turn so you can't see where you're going. It can get stuck on the other sides of walls, and I've lost count of how many times I've done a simple turn only to run smack into a ghost I couldn't see and die. Just shit all over the place. The game is only 3 short levels long. Once you beat them, the game repeats the same levels with an additional ghost thrown in. I don't know if the game has an ending or if it's one of those just try to beat your high score who gives a crap games, and quite frankly, I don't care. The game fundamentally is not fun to play. About the only positive for the game is its default price is only 99 cents and it's usually on sale for 50 cents. So is the game at least worth a piddly little 50 cents? No! On to the next game, also donated by Colby KRD, Attrition Nuclear Domination. Holy shit, the game has an options menu! I've never seen one in a digital homicide game before. And now I know why. The game crashes when you open it. This is a real-time strategy game where you and 1 to 9 computer enemies have a simulated global nuclear war, and I have no idea how in the actual frozen-over hell this game works. The game has no tutorial or instructions. All you get is a list of key bindings with zero clue what any of these actions do. You just rotate the planet and certain countries light up when you mouse over them, but you click and nothing happens. I don't even know which of these countries is mine. After fumbling around for about 5 minutes, I discover you're supposed to click on these cities, which still doesn't do anything. I clicked launch on over a dozen cities, it worked twice, and the rest of the time nothing happened. And after about 15 minutes clicking everything, trying to get any kind of a response out of the frickin' game, the game's over. I have no idea what just happened. Eventually I discover there actually is a list of instructions in the description on the store page. The summary that's meant to sell the game is the only place you can get even a basic explanation of how the hell you play this. So here's what you do. You start the game with 0 resources, so you send gatherers to go collect these tiny orange squares. Once you have resources, you spend them to launch missiles at enemy cities and use anti-ballistic missile systems to shoot down enemy missiles. The game is mostly functional, the AI seems competent, and the gameplay is stimulating once you find the goddamn instructions, but the boring presentation and the awful user interface make it way more annoying to play than it should be. The whole game, you're just struggling with a complete lack of information. There's no feedback when you select resources, or when your gatherers are sent out to get them, or when they return, so I thought nothing was happening when I clicked on them. You're given no feedback when you try to fire a missile, you're not told when you're being targeted or when you're under attack, you're not told if your missiles actually hit their targets, you just play in a total blackout vacuum where you have no idea what's going on outside your immediate pigeonhole field of vision. You're told that it's harder to shoot down missiles that are in orbit instead of the atmosphere, and I've never figured out how to tell the difference. Even playing seriously and actively trying to win, I can barely see missiles that are headed towards my territory, and the anti-ballistic defenses that you have only seem to work when it feels like it. The game lists the missile silos each player has left when it appears to be impossible to attack anything but cities. On that topic, the amount of strategy is minimal since it's basically shoot an enemy, hope it hits, and keep checking to make sure you're not under attack. There's something wrong with the controls where trying to rotate the globe vertically either barely moves or moves at an awkward slant, and you can bet money on the game crashing if you try to open any menu that's not essential to the game. It all points to a game that was kicked out the door for release the instant that its basic functions were completed, when a little bit of extra development time and polish could have turned this into something decent. Once you find the damn instructions, you can get some enjoyment out of this game, but I still don't think it's worth recommending. I'll take Dice Wars over this shell of a strategy game. At least that game's pleasant to look at. Now for the last game donated by Colby KRD, Medieval Mercs. This one is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Move left and right with the A and D keys, attack with the mouse button, and die in about 10 seconds. Damn! The game is sort of an RPG. You fight an encounter where the enemies are ridiculously more powerful than you die very quickly, and you slowly gain experience and items until you're strong enough to survive the battle. Yes, the central mechanic of the game is repeatedly getting the ever-loving shit beaten out of you to slowly gain XP. It doesn't take long before your morale and interest just go straight down the drain. You get some really strong super attacks, and if the enemies drop coins, you can buy health refills mid-fight, but the enemies are so broken they only prolong your death a minute or two. There's no way to avoid taking damage. The enemies cannot be outmaneuvered. They don't flinch when you hit them, so you can't stop them from attacking you. You can't outrun them. There's no block or dodge maneuver, and I really hate these harpy things whose projectiles have huge explosions you can't dodge. There's no tactics, no strategy, just you getting pounded into the dirt again and again and again! Shit! You pick up inventory items that can be used to craft equipment in between levels, but the game idiotically showers you with gear for characters you don't unlock until the end of the game. So most of the shit you pick up is worthless. Sometimes the game will glitch and just not let you equip an item even if it's for the correct character, and once I had a helmet I couldn't equip just disintegrate from my inventory. Wish I could get out of the game so easily. You start out with this dwarf character, and after about a half hour straight of getting my teeth kicked in, I get him up to level 4, I craft some gear he can actually use, and all of a sudden the encounters are a total cakewalk. I'm dishing decent damage and somehow healing health much faster than I lose it, no idea how. I'm curb stomping all of the enemies and not coming close to dying anymore. So the game has 2 settings, hard as balls and easy as piss. I don't even have to use the special attacks or items anymore. It's just one mash the button until everything's dead level, only now I'm the unkillable Lord God King of Dwarves and nothing can scratch me. Once you complete 10 of these identical encounters in a row, you unlock a knight who plays exactly the same as the dwarf, only with some range and he's not leveled up, and a second level that's identical to the first, only with different enemy skins. I swear the enemies aren't even stronger, they just look different. So playing the game is completely pointless because the crap you unlock is exactly the same as the crap you start with. It's one simple level and I'm stuck in God mode. Nothing poses any remote threat to me even on the higher difficulty level. And let's not forget the glitch that freezes the game if you attempt to manage your inventory mid-fight so that you can actually pick up more random drops. Speaking of random drops, the enemies don't drop any items in the second level, and I'm not convinced that was on purpose. Plus, you buy items and manage your inventory by clicking on the screen while the enemies are still coming at you with no breaks. I'm kinda busy right now. Was there no better way to handle this system? Overall, Medieval Mercs is basically one shitty level that you're asked to replay ad nauseum, and the combat is just mashing a single button with no skill or strategy. For the love of God, do not buy it. Next, let's try Grog Wars. It's a really shitty version of Space Invaders, a game so old and so simple it takes concentrated effort to make shitty. When you try and move your ship, it moves between predetermined spots like a damn Game & Watch game rather than just being able to move like a normal game. See my ship here? This is me briefly tapping the movement keys. None of the enemies actually shoot you except for the UFOs at the top. You click the mouse like crazy to fire a never-ending volley of shots, and you kill everything long before it touches you. It's stupid easy. The ships all look like crappy clip art you'd see in a bright and colorful kiddie game. They don't mesh at all with the various backgrounds, title screen, or music. Plus the ships don't so much move as they pop from one location to the next. You couldn't have the ship slide or something? Loads of digital Homicide games have massive glitches, but goddamn, they managed to top themselves here. Grog Wars has a glitch that makes it impossible to play. I played the game 4 times, and 3 of those times I had to stop because the next enemy wave failed to spawn. Look at this! I'm stuck on a blank screen and the game won't let me advance. This happened 2 minutes into the game. This happened after 2 levels. The game keeps shitting itself inside out from the word go. I just can't play it. So how do you screw up a game as simple as Space Invaders this badly? They want $4 for this! God, I want to go play Space Invaders on the Nintendo 64. That game was freaking awesome. This, I have no words. Shit Sunday. There, I found the words. Next up, Starship Nova Strike. It's another bad scrolling shooter, and my god, it may be even worse than Grog Wars. It has the same crap controls where you seem to move to pre-assigned spots on a random grid rather than just moving normally. I'm trying to dodge asteroids and a ton of other obstacles, and I have no idea where I'll move when I use the keys, and the controls always seem to overreact. The controls constantly overshoot to where you can't move with any precision, and there's so many obstacles you can barely dodge that you die constantly. How do they keep screwing up basic movement? All you do is fly forward until you die. There doesn't seem to be any ending. Not that I'd know since I haven't had a playthrough last longer than a few minutes. You're just supposed to go for a high score, and with the bad controls and cheap deaths, you lose interest almost immediately. Pausing doesn't pause the game, and enemies can still shoot you after exiting the back end of the screen. It's just cheap. They also couldn't be asked to make a death animation, so the game just smash cuts to black whenever you die. You'll never know what killed you, and at one point I died the second that I spawned into the game. Topping it all off, somehow, in a simple 2D side-scroller, the frame rate sputters constantly. A dirt simple concept ruined by outrageously poor craftsmanship, this game is dookie. Next, let's take a look at Deadly Prophets. This is a first-person shooter where you wander through dungeons shooting enemies with magic spells. It's playable, but lousy. The frame rate is shit. Fraps says that it never got above 15 frames per second. You can equip 4 spells at once, 2 for offense and 2 for defense, but the offense spells all seem to do the exact same thing. Shoot a homing fireball straight forward. Different spells are supposed to be effective against different enemies, but I've experimented and I notice absolutely zero difference from weapon to weapon. Even the bosses die so quickly you don't ever need to swap out weapons. They're supposed to be resistant to all of the spells, but they all die in less than 10 hits. This ogre just died in 5. Each spell also has infinite ammo. You're told that each spell needs specific reagents to work, but I've never seen anything about reagents and I've never had a spell fail to work. I'm guessing they wanted to add ammo, decided not to, and forgot to change the text back. Your entire arsenal is completely interchangeable. Your spells even level up, and I've compared it. A level 13 spell did the exact same damage as a brand new level 0 spell I'd never used before. So screw it, just pick the color you like best and just use that the whole game. The defensive weapons have a good variety to them, but the enemies are so damn easy to kill you'll never need them. There's no strategy, just shoot like an 80s action star until everything's dead. I haven't found a single enemy that fires projectiles, and the only AI any of the enemies have is Leroy! So they all just bum rush you as you mow them down long before they can reach you. So the entire game is just walk into a room, mash the fire button while walking backwards to slaughter all the hapless identical enemies, take almost no damage since they die before they can reach you, collect the 5 million health potions they dropped, and go to the next room. Yeah, you'll never be wanting for health. I swear half the enemies drop health. It doesn't take long before this gets really boring. Every room is the same. Every enemy is the same. The monotony isn't helped by the fact that each level seems to be entirely made of 4 or 5 recycled rooms. I've seen this exact chamber at least 3 dozen times. You're basically playing the same one stage over and over again. You can loot crafting items from enemies, many of which were directly reused from medieval mercs, and you can buy equipment from the store to make yourself stronger, but I notice exactly zero difference in the gameplay after getting equipped and supposedly leveling up everything. Each level just plays the same, and eventually I found out there's nothing on Earth stopping you from just running to the exit and ignoring the enemies. Since you phase right through bad guys and have a shit ton of health, and the game has no goal besides get to the portal at the end, the game itself doesn't want you playing it. About the most I can say for this boring crap heap is that it seems to be devoid of major glitches, but I'm bored out of my mind. Moving on. Last game, thank Christ, Dungeons of Cragmore. This is the only game of theirs on Steam that's gotten positive reviews, but to be honest, this one's just hard to talk about. Dungeons of Cragmore is an MMO where players go around, kill enemies with magic spells to collect crafting items, team up to raid dungeons, and fight each other for control of towers that give you power-ups. Sound cool? It would be, if it weren't completely barren. The game has no tutorial or instructions, so I dropped into the game and was just left wandering around, fighting bees, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But luckily there was one other player in the game named Shemaya who filled me in on the details. He was like my Obi-Wan, teaching me the ways of the shit. See, Dungeons of Cragmore used to have a ton of online players, but they all abandoned the game due to a laundry list of massive bugs. From the controls completely freezing up, which happened to me in the short time I was playing, to the game completely failing to harvest the stone and wood you need to build towers. And God, does that sound familiar. I was going to try harvesting stone myself, but when I found some, I got murdered by wolves, and there seems to be no way to flee from a fight where you're horribly outmatched. You're just freaking dead. The game also runs like garbage, never cracking 10 frames per second on either my or Shemaya's machine, and the graphics in the dungeons flicker like the game's collapsing. And with no online players, the game just doesn't have jack shit to offer. The game has 0 actual quests other than slay X amount of each enemy. The entirety of the content is reliant on online players, and there aren't any. With no players, there's absolutely nobody to fight, there's nobody to defend your structures against, and the dungeon enemies are way too powerful to you to stand a chance without help. I know because I fought this spider and got immediately curb stomped and couldn't run away. There's just no content, and what little content is there is unplayable with barren servers. There's nothing to do except walk around and die. Shemaiah said that Digital Homicide has repeatedly promised to patch the game, and hasn't, and players are staying away until it's fixed. I won't hold my breath. This is amazing. Even when they manage to crank out a game people like, they can't help themselves screwing it up. People abandoned Dungeons of Cragmore and said, en masse, we'll come back when you fix this shit, and Digital Homicide just shrugged and moved on to something else. And all of this isn't even counting the, at time of recording, 24 games they have on Steam greenlight. Games they finished but haven't been able to release yet. 3 of these games look like direct reskinned clones of Grog Wars. Also, Grog Wars and Starship Nova Strike, probably the least functional games in their entire library. Those are their 2 most recent full releases. 9 games into their career, any developer should have more skill than this. And consider this. Digital Homicide's first Steam release was Forsaken Uprising in early access somewhere around August 2014. It is now May 2016. These guys have been in business a little less than 2 years, and they've cranked out at least 35 games. That's more than 1 game per month. Scott Cawthon catches flack for working at a quarter of that speed. Their entire business strategy is to spam Steam with cheap games, charge $1 or less for them, and just hope that enough people try them and don't get refunds that they make a profit. Patches, nurturing an online community, developing a promising base of a game into something worthwhile, instead of shoving it out the door first second it works. Screw all that noise. There are a few games in their library that could be good with some patching, rebalancing, and polish. But no, they treat their games like TIE fighters. Make them cheap, deploy them in bulk, and it doesn't matter if they're crap because sheer numbers will result in success. And they won't change. They think that all of their games are fantastic. They think they already do put sufficient effort into all of their games. They genuinely do think we're only picking on them because we're assholes or Jim Sterling put us up to it. Without a gifted proctologist to yank their heads out their asses, we're not going to shake them out of this delusion. So grab an umbrella and keep it on hand, because I have a feeling this shitstorm is only going to get worse.